So what I want to talk about today is investing during uncertain times, the times that we are in today. So I just wanted to talk about that. But before that, let me give you a little bit about myself. My name is Pratik Kodial. I run a hedge fund. I started the hedge fund in August 2022. I did a corporate job before that. I was leading pricing, marketing, etc. at JCPenney, at Best Buy, etc. I've been in the tech world as well as the business world for quite some time. I always had a passion for investing, so I thought I'll make this my full-time job. So moved my passion to a job at this point in time. Let me start with a little bit of a story, which is what Charlie Munger talked to Howard Marks. So again, for those who are not aware, Charlie Munger is the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. He's a 99-year-old person, in my opinion, my best teacher. And what he talked to Howard Marks, who was actually writing a book, The Most Important Things, he wrote that book in 2012. He said, investing is not supposed to be easy. Anyone who finds it easy is stupid. Okay, and so Charlie Munger is very famous for putting a lot of wisdom into short words. Okay, he's called the best 30-second mind in the world. So moving to the next slide, there was a lot of wisdom packed in this single sentence. And I'll just state a few things that Howard Marks included this in his 2015 memo as why it's a double-edged sword. There's always a dichotomy in investing. So I'll read a few as I said. If you invest, you'll lose money when the markets decline. If you don't invest, you will not make money when the market rises. So there's always this dichotomy of what do we do with investing. Market timing will add great value if you time it right. Buy and hold will yield great results if you can't time it right. Similarly, aggressiveness will help when the market rises but hurts when it fails. Defensiveness will help when the markets fall but hurt when it rises. So there's always this aspect that each investor has to consider. In some ways, we're all investors. So moving to the next slide. Now let's talk about what Warren Buffett did in 2007. So he took a bet with the hedge fund industry or the fund industry, saying that as a combination of funds, no one will beat the S&P over the next 10 years. So he landed with Prodigy Partners was the challenger, and he laid a bet of $1 million, which he won in 2018, or 2017. So basically, in the box on the right side that you see that the S&P gave about 125% returns at an annualized of 8.5. None of the hedge funds actually came close to it. So what this slide basically tells is that the institutions are not working that great to give great returns to the investor, generally speaking. There are obviously these individual, some do well, but as a combination of funds, they did not do well. So then what about the individual investor? Do they beat the market? So we go to the next slide. Now, this is a study done by JP Morgan, and so this is over 20 years between 2002 to 2021. Look at where the S&P is at 9.5%. That's the green bar, sorry, it may not be very legible from far away. And then you've got the average investor. The average investor does about 3.6%. There are several studies that have been conducted where even within the same mutual fund, an average investor performs about 600 basis points lesser in spite of being invested in the same mutual fund, because they keep coming in and going out because they feel that they can time the market, and it's near impossible, and I don't know of anyone who can do it. Fidelity did another study between 2003 and 2013, so 10 years. The best investors were the investors who were dead because they did not transact. Everyone else transacted and unfortunately got the timing wrong. And we'll see this all the time, right, where investors kind of try to time the market and unfortunately hit the bottom or buy at the tops. 2021 was a great example. 2022 was a great example. Moving to the next slide. So here we've talked about individual investor has an issue, the institutions have an issue as well, but there's still a lot to gain, the power of the market. So just to give you a sense here, in terms of the long-term power of the market, the S&P, if you had invested 100,000 for 30 years back till the end of last month, you would have been at $2.4 million if you had invested in S&P at an average return of 9.92. US small caps would have given 8.76, and so on and so forth, right? And if you had inflation adjusted, you'd be at 2.68%. So either at 2.4 million right down to 243,000. So what you invest makes a huge difference to the final outcome. And so it's still really, really important. The markets are very powerful, and they can return great value to you over time. So moving to the next slide. Thank you. how can you get that value? And I think Jairaman talked about it a little bit earlier, which I thought was great, is the aspect of staying invested, right? I mean, our inability to time the market, we should stay away from it. This is just an example, just to show that you know the two lines. This is basically a person who's invested for 20 years, ending of last month, September. And in one case, the investor got out at the bottom of 2008 crisis and held for 1 year and put that money back, right? So again, the investor got all the money out at the bottom of 2008, held for 1 year and put the money back. See the difference that comes in, right? So in spite of that 50% loss that occurred in 2008, 2009 timeframe, if the person had just stayed invested, they would be at 639K versus 371K. So that's the difference. And if someone had held cash, they would be at 84. So cash is generally not a good investment. It's important to have cash, but over the long term, not generally a great investment to make. So that's just the aspect of staying invested. Moving to the next slide. I touched upon this a little bit already, time in the market versus timing the market, right? It is so much important to be in the market as opposed to timing the market, which is near impossible for anyone to do. The lines that you see here, the topmost line is S&P. The lines there is if you miss the best 10 days, if you miss the next best 20 days, if you miss the best 30 days, what occurs? So it gives you a sense that if you miss the best 10 days over a 20-year period, you would be at 4.6% versus a 7%. That's a 300 basis points, which is massive over 20 years, right? So again, the intent here for me to communicate is primarily stay in the market, stay invested, don't try to time the market. So that's the message of this slide. And missing the best 50 days, by the way, you would be at negative returns. Moving to the next one. This is just a compounding one. The human mind doesn't do compound interest very well, right? I mean, we need calculators to do it. I'll just focus on the 15% at 15 years or 15% at 20 years versus the S&P. So the S&P typically gives 10%. At 672K at 10%, 20 years. At 15%, it is 1.6 million. It's a 10x difference with a 5% difference a year. So investors like the 30, 40, 50% returns. It doesn't happen. Going for compounded 10, 15% usually does the magic for you guys. This should be it. I think one more slide maybe. Can you? Yeah, I think the big question you guys need to ask yourself before investing directly or through a fund or otherwise is, what advantage do you have as an individual? Do you have an informational advantage, which is you have more information than anyone else? If your source of information is CNBC, you're not going to go too far. Do you have an analytical edge? Which is basically you can look at businesses differently than what others look at. Possible, especially in this room, as you guys are running businesses, but if you don't have that edge, don't play that game that you don't have an edge in. The third and the most important edge actually is the behavioral edge. This is where each one of you need to focus on how do you invest. What happened in 2022? What happened in 2008? Not what you think has happened to you, what you actually did. Look at your statements. What actions did you take, right? Did you sell at the bottom? Things of that nature. And if you don't have these edges, it's a tough one. You probably want to go mutual funds, S&P index, or invest with some manager if you would like to do that. Stay away from losing money. And the last one here is time horizon, which is that you need to have a long-term horizon for yourself. That's your best bet over time. So that's pretty much it. The last slide was just about the fund. I'll just take 10 seconds. This is my fund. This is how I'm performing. If you guys have any questions and want to chat with me, happy to do that. So thanks a lot.